Tonight, I just wanted to chat with you guys about Gen Z, and you guys, I'm sure, have noticed that I'm kind of obsessed with the generations, and it's just such a relevant topic, especially in today's world. So, I just wanted to maybe provide some insight that I've learned and observed about this generation, especially as of late. So, before we get started, though, I would like to encourage you to tag anyone that you might know or may know that could benefit from a conversation on the generations, and particularly tonight on Gen Z, whether they're a parent, a friend, a teacher, a relative, anyone that's sort of interested in any kind of intro or extra generational communication is certainly welcome. And I'll also be posting the replay of this video in in my Facebook group. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing is that some people have described Gen Z as being sort of apathetic and unmotivated. Others have noticed that some of them are afraid to take risks, especially, even with seemingly small tasks, simple tasks like asking a question in class, or sometimes even more challenging ones like, going for your driver's license or, asking someone out on a date. These are types of activities that certainly have fallen by the wayside, and we see more and more adolescents that are less willing to cross the bounds of their comfort zones. And sometimes this is even to the point where they would rather, just sort of stay locked in their rooms than even just step outside. Right. So there's a lot of factors at play here, a lot of observations being made. And with a generation that is so complex, it certainly could be a number of things going on. And not to mention, there really is no singular or linear cause to any of this, but rather it's sort of a multi-layered web of interconnected thoughts, events, value systems, and influences that sort of interweave to form this generation. But let's go ahead and look at a few common threads related particularly to apathy and motivation. And let's see if there are some. Oh, sorry, my dog. She's right here. She's just looking at me. Sorry. But let's look at a few common threads related to apathy and motivation and see if there are some, sort of small but practical adjustments that we can make, right, to reach this generation so that they can find their way. So one of the key things is that there's a particular thing that they don't like. And despite the fear, this generation, or sort of the adverseness to taking risks, this generation, despite all of that, they don't like to be overprotected, right? We can see that when they stop growing, their natural curiosity about the world just wanes, and their motivation diminishes. This generation just does not thrive in sort of smothering environments where the adults do the majority of the decision making and thinking for them. This generation really values their independence, and they value independence and also guidance, right? So in other words, they need a little bit of room to breathe. But they need that support system to show them the facts, guide them to the facts, and equip them with some tools and some skills that they really need to flourish, sort of free from harsh criticism. So in my class, this is something that I'm highly aware of, and it's certainly not easy for me personally to do. For some, I realize it's a little easier, but I personally remember that when I first became a teacher 8 years ago, that it was nice to sort of be affirmed and needed by my students. But sometime later, I realized that, for me, it was a little bit better for me to sometimes take a step back. And so in my class, how this sort of works is, some people always say, well, what does that look like? I will, the way that I describe it is that when I'm giving instructions, I'm teaching something, I'm teaching them a new concept or whatever it might be, and I sense that there's kind of an antsiness to them. And I sense that they're kind of excited. They know that there's an activity that they're going to have to do. They know that there's a task that they're going to have to complete, right? And I can sense that there's a little bit of antsiness to kind of get to it already, right? Then that's kind of the dinger, the bell in my head that says, okay, it's almost time to let them go and give them time to do the task or process the information. And so I do this specifically by reading their facial expressions. It's just reading the room. And so when I see them kind of nodding their heads when I'm talking, and they're slightly shifting in their seats, and maybe just ever so slightly turning to their partners because they know that they're getting ready to work together, then I know it's sort of like picking a fruit off of a tree. It has to be at just the right moment, and then it's time. So that's sort of what I'm looking for when I know that they're able to sort of work on their own. And then the next thing is giving them options. So just kind of, I'm going to kind of go on a little tangent here, but just give me a second to kind of formulate my thoughts here. But there's a phrase that I use in my classes all the time now. And the phrase is, you have options. And so it's one of the most powerful things that I feel that I could say to my Zers, because some of them do feel smothered. There are other Gen Zers who maybe feel like, they feel smothered in their lives in general, not necessarily, by this person or that person, but just in general, they might feel smothered. And there are others that might feel that nobody cares at all. And then there are some Zers that have stated that they feel that they are told what to think way more than they are actually allowed to think for themselves. So this phrase, you have options, continues to come up again and again. And so in the beginning of the year, I sort of, it's a process, but I gauge the compliance level of my students. That's the first thing at the beginning of the year. And I ask myself, okay, are they likely to just listen to me without question? Or are they going to challenge me a bit more? And either way is fine. I just have to know how to handle it. But my kids this year in particular are very compliant. And I've even asked them why they felt that this was the case. Not because I thought that the compliance was a bad thing or something out of the norm, or out of the norm or out of the ordinary, but just out of genuine curiosity, I would ask them that. And now we talk about the generations a lot, and they seem to get a lot out of the discussion because they participate a lot. And so I know that I certainly get a lot out of it for sure. I learn every time I talk to someone about this, from them, and just kind of by talking it out, I learn a lot. And so anyway, when some of my Zers answered this question about like why they were so compliant, many of them stated that they just do what they're told so that they can just finish the work. Essentially, they just want to be done. They just want to have time for themselves because they just have like a huge volume of work. They just want to get it all done. But every now and then, though, you will see the kids, their frustration will pop up, and they'll come into class and they'll be talking about this or that problem. And interestingly enough, when they do that, when these moments of frustration, whether it's in their classes or something in their personal life that they're dealing with, when they do come up, what's interesting is that Gen Zs really, they don't do anything about what's bothering them, right? In a lot of cases, whether they're failing a class or they're dealing with something personal, this generation is sort of notorious, and they even admit this, they're sort of notorious for ignoring the problems that they have and sort of hoping that they go away. So in the beginning of the year, again, it goes back to this phrase, you have options. So in the beginning of the year, whenever we sort of come across a problem or a challenge or sort of a snag in the road, I'll ask them for their input. I'll say, what is it that we can do to alleviate this? And what is it that we can do to resolve this issue? And usually it's for, especially in the beginning of the year, it's usually for a relatively small thing, like, what if you get stuck on a question? Or what if you don't know how to say something? Or, what can you do, right? And so, again, what options do you have? You have options. So it goes back to that phrase. But this year, as I've observed them, I've realized that for them, it's not about emphasizing what actions to take, right? Like look up the word, ask me if you don't know, ask a classmate, blah, blah, blah. It's not about emphasizing what actions to take. And it's not even really emphasizing the why, right? Like, oh, why do I look up the word? Well, it's because I don't know the word and I need to know the word. I should know the word, blah, blah, blah. It's not even about the why with them. It's about emphasizing the fact that they have options. And it's been tremendous because a lot of Zers are accustomed to really rigid inflexibility on all fronts. Sometimes at school, sometimes at home, sometimes on social media. You're either in or you're out. You're a have or a have not. You either can or you can't. You understand or you don't, right? You conform or you're canceled. Everything for them, this world that we've created for them, is so bilinear that they don't realize that they have so many more options available to them. So in my class, when these moments happen, these moments of frustration, or when they're coming in complaining about something or anything like that, right? And sometimes the problems are simple and sometimes they're complex. But my go-to response is, okay, let's back up. What are our options? And I will tell my kids, okay, don't worry, like not all of the options are going to be viable. They're not all going to be great, right? But that's normal. So let's think of as many as we can without any kind of judgment about them, right? So at the start of an activity, I will anticipate some of the challenges that they're going to have, some of the questions that might arise, and I will let them know that ahead of time. And I'll say, hey, you're going to run into some challenges doing this. You might, right? But remember one thing. You're equipped and you have options. And this has made all the difference in my class, because now when I don't give them the options on a silver platter, and when I don't just emphasize the why and start lecturing about why you should do this or do that, right? They really have started to respond to that very well, and they start thinking about the options that they have on their own, and sometimes they're very creative with this, and so it's about giving them sort of the flexibility and the intellectual attitude, or intellectual latitude, that they need to really solve their problems on their own, but with support, loving support and guidance. And truly for me, this has made all the difference. I personally feel that their world is so much bigger than just a four-sided device now, which is great. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share with you today. And if you'd like to hop on my email list to sort of never miss a generational freebie or training or anything like that, just DM me and I'll make sure you get that. And again, feel free, if you hung on to the end of this video, congratulations, but feel free to tag anyone you know or anyone who you feel that would benefit from having these ongoing sort of open dialogues. So I hope to see you again soon, and I hope that you have a wonderful night. Bye.